tool use approach becomes more powerful when it involves working with complex queries, and that requires tool use to run in a sequential manner, and we call it multi-step tool use. So let's look at examples on what this means. So the example that we have seen in the previous section is a single step scenario where, for example, in this case, you are given two tools. One is the web search and the other one is Python interpreter. So given the question of what is Apple's revenue in 2023, you just need one information to answer the question, which is Apple 2023 revenue, and the LLM will have enough information to respond to the query. The Cohere API also supports parallel tool calling, which we didn't see in the previous section. So now if the question is what is Apple's and Google's revenue in 2023, now the LLM needs two separate information, the revenue of Apple and Google separately, for it to be able to respond. And for this, it needs to run queries in parallel. And then we get to the scenario of sequential reasoning, where the tool calls run in multiple steps. So for example, if you have a question of plot Apple's 2023 revenue on a bar chart, you first need to get the Apple 2023 revenue information, and then you can use that information to run a Python function to plot it on a chart. And the same way how you saw in single step, the Cohere API also supports running multi-step in parallel. Okay, so now we are back to the code example, and now we are using the same steps that we saw in the previous section. The only difference is that we are now wrapping the whole 4 steps in a function. And the reason for that is we are allowing for multi-step to happen. And in particular, here we have a loop of tool calls. As long as the model continues to generate tool calls in every step, it will continue to run in this loop of tool calling and getting the tool results in steps 2 and 3. And finally, once the model decides that no more tool calls are required, it will continue to generate the response. Okay, so this is an example that we're going to use. The question is, what's that feature to view artifacts? Do you have any Jupyter Notebook examples? So this requires the model to first figure out what's that feature, and once it knows what that feature is, only then it will be able to search for the code examples for that feature. So it requires 2 steps to respond to this question. So now you can see that showing in the tool plan here. So it says that the model will search for the feature to view artifacts and then search for Jupyter Notebooks examples of this feature. So that's an example of a model taking multiple steps to answer a question. So let's extend that concept a little bit further. So a multi-step scenario is useful for sequential reasoning example that we saw earlier, but it's also useful when the model needs to make adjustments and corrections based on the output that it receives from a particular step. The model says that I will search for wave product from the developer docs and write an answer based on that. It goes on to search the developer docs, but the problem we have here is that the developer docs doesn't contain information about the wave product. So now the model says that I could not find information about the wave product. So it does a replanning and it will search the internet for this information. Now it needs a second step to respond to the query. And now in the second step, it's calling the internet with a similar query. It gets back the results. And now the internet does contain more information about Weave. And because of that, it's able to generate the response. Weave is a lightweight toolkit for tracking and evaluating LLM applications.